I want to tell you the story about how one person can make a difference. One person can correct history. One person can truly uncover something that has been lost for a long, long time. It was about 5 years ago when Brian Kilmeade from the Fox and Friends morning show came over to my office. He asked if we could have lunch. He said, I have a story to tell you. And I said, okay. So he came over to my office and we had lunch. And he starts telling me this story about this spy ring under George Washington. And he starts weaving this story that I had never heard before. And I said, Brian, this is fantastic. You know, where did you hear this? He said, Glenn, I heard this about 10 years ago. Now, this is 15 years ago he heard this story. He said, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe this story, and I couldn't believe that I didn't know it. And I happen to live in this area where it all happened. And he said, so I started doing some detective work. And he said, the guys are all buried right around me. You know, he said, it's all right here. It all happened right here. And he said, and it's driving me nuts because, I mean, some of this stuff is still taught at the CIA. We would have lost the war had it not been for George Washington's spy ring. I said, you should write a book. And he has. And it is tremendous. It is called George Washington's Secret Six. And Brian Kilmeade is with us. Hi, Brian. How are you?
Well, Glenn, I can't believe you recall that with how busy your life's been. You wrote your own Washington book on top of that. That's very accurate, except for you didn't serve anything. We were supposed to have lunch. We got engrossed in a conversation. There were no refreshments. I don't think you should mislead your...
So the truth really comes out.
Wow.
You promised
caught in a lie. Caught him in a lie again. Yeah. Caught in a lie again.
Wow.
Just Brian Kilmeade.
Thank you, Brian, for bringing the truth.
You're exposing this, too.
No, I mean, in all seriousness, it was great. And you're the first. I listened to you. I know your passion for history. I'm watching your show, and I go, I cannot believe how much I'm picking up from your show. And when I walked into your house one time when you was mistakenly invited me to a party of yours, and I looked around and I saw Washington and how this tributes to all the founding fathers, I go, I got to bring this up to Glenn when the time's right.
I've never heard it. I've never heard this before, and it's so important. I mean, everybody knows Nathan Hale, but nobody even knows Nathan Hale. Guy starts at Yale. 2 days later, he's hung. Really bad spy. Washington decides to get serious. So tell us the story, Brian.
Yeah, and it's his roommate who he turns to is Benjamin Talmadge, and in Washington says, listen, well, we can't win this war without New York, and we can't get into New York straight up, taking on the British. They outnumber us. They started with 40,000. They topped out at 90,000 troops. The French weren't in yet. I have to find out what they're doing before they're doing it. So he took his 3,000 guys, and he went into Connecticut up by the Hudson, and he goes, I got to find out what's going on in New York. Talmadge, make it happen. And
can you tell the part about Talmadge and the woman who goes in to just buy some eggs? You didn't. The woman who's with him down, I think it's in Philadelphia, and she's just going in to buy some eggs, but she's actually one of these spies, and they almost get caught.
They almost get caught, and that's when Talmadge actually got kind of reprimanded, and he realized how dangerous this is going to be, and that's why another thing was around Philadelphia, which he did not know well, but what he did know well was Long Island, and he also knew who he could trust. So he took these citizen farmers, and let me just back up 1 second. I believe, like you believe, that fundamentally Americans are good and have heroic qualities. It's not just about Michael Jordan in basketball and George Washington in history. It's not just about certain people that do heroic things in battle like Patton. I believe we all have that within us, and I believe this story backs up my belief because one's a farmer, one's a tavern owner, one is a dry goods owner, a woman who's a socialite, one person's an editor, and they sit there behind enemy lines every day for 4 years, knowing at any moment they will suffer the fate of Nathan Hale if they're uncovered, but they believe in America and the idea, because it didn't exist yet, more than anything else. And they believe that somehow, some way they'd pull this thing off. And by using encryption, invisible ink, and by going to with dead drops that the CIA told me they still use today, they were able to stop the Benedict Arnold from handing over West Point. They would give Washington a heads up, a general's about to turn to the other side. In fact, he's communicating regularly with the British. They had their ears up and their antennas up, and they were able to stop this whole thing before it happened. The French are about to pull into Rhode Island. They get word that the British know about it. So Washington gets word from the spy ring. They're going to wipe out the French before they get their sea legs, before they can lose their sea legs. So Washington, instead of trying to stop the British, has a fake, goes ahead and has a fake hit on New York. So they say, I don't want to be the general to lose New York to Washington. It's all a fake. It's all a ruse. They stay home. The French can land. And what we found original in this story, Glenn, that I didn't know when I went to your office 5 years ago, is that they actually were able to receive, Rivington, the naval codes, the British naval codes prior to the Battle of Yorktown. And they got him to Washington en route, and so happy was Washington, and we found this out by reading the transcripts from his step-grandson. So happy was George Washington. He went, when he first came to New York, his first stop was to Rivington's Gazette, Royal Gazette, the loyalist newspaper, to give him a hug and thank him for what he did.
Now, the loyalist newspaper, on the side of the crown, or so everyone thought.
He's supposedly he started writing for the crown and for loyalists, and he would do that, and fine. I'll interview the general, I'll interview the lieutenant, I'll interview the captain, and then I'll give put that information in the paper, and then I'll give additional information to Washington. I'd write it down in encryption. I'd send it to the tavern owner, who would jam it in his supplies that he was picking up for his tavern. He'd hop back on his horse, go 55 miles through enemy territory, all the way back to his place to give it to a guy in a whaleboat and a cannon who would row across the Long Island Sound to get this information to Washington because they believed in the cause.
So it's really amazing is the woman, what is she, 355 or something?
That's all we know.
Pardon me?
That's all we know. I cannot give a direct identity.
Right. Now, to tell a little bit about her.
We know this. The intelligence picks up considerably when she comes in. She's referred to in 3 of the letters, and one is, we're about to give you somebody that's going to be an extreme help to us in our cause. And it seems as though he got close to a Major Andre. Your listeners are educated enough to possibly know who he is, but picture a gregarious, popular guy on the other side who also had a spying mission. His mission, one of them, was to link up with Benedict Arnold and turn over West Point. And that's what he was en route to doing until he was mysteriously intercepted. Why was he intercepted? Well, 2 arbitrary guys didn't believe his story that he was just a business guy heading up. However, Benjamin Talmadge was right behind and was able to grab him, get him to talk, and intercept the message that was within him and find out it was earmarked for Benedict Arnold. He was going to turn over West Point with Washington in it to the British. That's how close this whole thing to becoming a part in 1779. So this woman was able to get in the social scene. These guys are drinking like crazy back then. They start talking like crazy back then. She's taking it down, giving it to Robert Townsend, the dry goods owner, who gives it to Rivington. Together, they encrypt it, they write invisible ink, they get it back to Washington. This whole thing was wired. By the time the British were wired, and we knew every step they were going to make before they could do it, because primarily of these 6 people, and we didn't even know who they were till 1930, and we're still uncovering what they did because that's how they wanted it. Washington knew it. I'll keep your secret, but I'll also keep your letters. And we built this book around Washington's own letters, from Talmadge, from the spies to Washington. So we're not looking for any opinion. We're building the story around what happened.
How come they didn't want their story told, Brian?
Well, back then, even if you were spying on the right side, it wasn't considered like today. You know, there was a duplicity about it that didn't really sit that well with many people, number one. Number two is they were a people who did not want credit, much like people we see serve in the military today and others. Mm-hmm. They're like, give the other guy credit. Don't give me credit. I don't want the praise. I don't want your money. They did it for expenses. They believed in the cause. And that's what gives me chills. When we were able to uncover through Talmadge's 77-page biography, Washington's last words at Francis Tavern in Manhattan still exists today. How he was so overwhelmed looking at his officers and Talmadge and a couple of spies who worked their way into the back of the room. He says, I can't speak anymore. Come up and touch my hand, and then I must go. You can't read this stuff. And accounted by a guy who was right to his left, Benjamin Talmadge. And as he leaves that Francis Tavern that still exists today, they say he walked to the water. So I thought I'd get to the tavern and the water would be 3 miles away or something. You could see the water from tavern. You know you can relive this moment. And I think it's so important. And you live this. And this is why I went to you right away. It's so important to know where we came from as a country to know where we should go as a country. These are the types of people that created this thing. They don't take no for an answer. They don't want credit for what they do. They believe in the cause. They believe in the country. They believe in our potential. And that's why I thought my little contribution would to give these people a little bit of the limelight that they didn't get in their lives. In this book, I have their grave sites. And I tell you, one is in the back of a barn, and there's hoses all over the place, and it's overgrown, and it's the original tombstone from when they died in 1823 in this one case, in Townsend's case. And I just think it's important. Those are the types of people that make up America. We could focus on the Founding Fathers, and we should, but there are extraordinary people we've never met.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it takes a village. I'm sorry. It is true that without Washington, we wouldn't have had a revolution or a country. But the same could be said that we wouldn't have had a country if it wasn't for Thomas Paine, because of the combination of Thomas Paine and George Washington. But it could also be said without number 355, who we have no idea who she is, we also probably wouldn't have had a country. So it really does take all of us.
Listen, I think if I can combine with your team, we could find out who actually this is. We have a bunch of opinions, but we had to go to print. And I don't want to use conjecture, but I believe there's people out there who are in strong belief in our role. Our research says it is. And I will say this, Brian, no one comes up to Brian Kilmeade and say, solve this theorem. I know I'm not the smartest guy in America, so I convened 27 of the historians that focused on this in the same room for the first time. And I taped it, and I asked the questions that need to be answered, and I watched them debate it at a Holiday Inn Express out in the eastern part of Long Island. And we came to conclusions that nobody else came to, and that's what we tried to put into this book. Not just recounting, but bringing the story forward.
Brian, I wish you the best of luck with the book. It's called George Washington's Secret Six, the spy ring that saved the American Revolution. Some of these things are still taught by the CIA.
Yeah.
This is history that you didn't know about, history that was lost, history that shows to you that you have a role, no matter how small you think you are.
Oh, yeah.
You have a huge role. And quite honestly, because of the author himself, Brian Kilmeade, I think you also see that the average person can change the course of history. The average person, like Brian, can say, this really bothers me, because this bothered you for like 15 years, right?
Yeah, I was fascinated by it. And here's the other thing, Glenn. If I didn't see a nationally known host take history and weave it into the news, I would not have gone forward with this book. I would just say, I would just talk to people, conversation. I would wait for the next book to come out or the next History Channel series to emerge. But when I saw you grab history and then anchor it to today, that's when I said to myself, there's a market for this. The people that care about what we talk about should know what we're doing. And also, when it comes to spying, that you might act high and mighty, but we wouldn't have a country if we didn't learn espionage.
Well, Brian, I salute you, and I'd love to be able to. I wish this was a movie or a
Let's do the movie, Glenn.
Series. Really, you got the cash?
No, you got the cash.
That's what everybody keeps saying to me. I'm like, no, really. I'm spending it all. Brian, thank you so much. And again, the name of the book is George Washington's Secret Six, the spy ring that saved the American Revolution. Best of luck, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Go get him, Glenn. Thanks.
You got it. Bye-bye.